Richard Wagamese was born into the Ojibwe First Nation in 1955 and passed away in 2017. One of Canada's most influential Indigenous authors, Richard Wagamese often blended his personal experiences and culture into his works. One of his most popular novels, Indian Horse, written in 2012, won the Code Burt Award for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis literature the year after its publication. The novel tells the story of Saul Indian Horse, an Ojibwe boy who lost everything related to his identity and culture when he was taken to St. Jerome's residential school. Throughout the book, Saul faces many challenges, including racism, physical and sexual abuse, and a lack of true belonging.
The novel begins with Saul in an alcoholism rehabilitation center, showing us right away that this story is about reflection, memory, and confronting the past, themes that quickly establish themselves as core to the book. In Indian Horse, Saul spends his early years in the bush with a band of close family. But even before his own life began, he was already impacted by residential schools. Because of the trauma his parents experienced there, Saul experienced the results of alcoholism and instability throughout his childhood. Later on, Saul's parents left him in the snow and never came back. Saul is eventually brought to St. Jerome's residential school, where he is subjected to a variety of abuse.
You may notice how Saul's journey closely reflects Richard Wagamese's own challenging childhood. Though Richard never experienced residential school directly, he felt its after effects through his parents. Due to their reliance on alcohol, his parents struggled to take care of him in his early years. Like Saul, Richard was abandoned in the winter at just 3 years old and bounced from foster home to foster home, though they never quite felt like a home to him. He experienced alienation and abuse in these homes, shaping him into someone who always felt like an outsider. This is what allowed him to retell his own story through Saul's.
When Richard was about 16, he began visiting libraries. Despite being surrounded by alcohol and drugs, he read book after book, which later became the foundation for his writing career, though he did not know it at the time. When he was 24, he landed his first job as a reporter, and also worked in television and radio. In 1994, he wrote his first book, Keeper and Me, which won the Writers Guild of Alberta Award for Best Novel. He continued to publish novels, poetry, and nonfiction throughout his life.
After leaving residential school, Saul turns to hockey as a way to escape, but continues to face racism and exclusion even as he becomes more successful. Over time, his reliance on alcohol increases and he becomes more and more disconnected from both himself and others. The story later returns to the rehabilitation center, where Saul is required to reflect on his life as part of his recovery. He begins to revisit events he had avoided for years, including the abuse he suffered at St. Jerome's, which he had long suppressed. A turning point comes when he returns to the land where his family once lived, including the place where his grandmother left him before he was taken away. This forces him to confront both the abuse and the loss of his family and culture. This is how Saul finally begins his journey to healing. Richard Wagamese's own path was similar. Like Saul, he struggled with alcoholism and the lasting effects of trauma for much of his life. He began to heal by reconnecting with his identity through writing and storytelling. Both Saul and Wagamese show that healing is not about forgetting the past, but about recognizing it and slowly rebuilding a connection to yourself and your culture.
Saul's recovery is important beyond just his personal story. Residential schools were designed to disconnect Indigenous children from their language, culture, and community. In both Saul's story and Wagamese's life, we can see the long-term effects of that system, including trauma, addiction, and displacement. However, we can also see resistance and survival. Even hockey, which represents the mainstream Canadian culture that excluded Saul, becomes a space where he can express his identity. This shows that Indigenous identity is not stuck in the past. It continues to adapt and survive, even within systems that were never built to include it.
When comparing Richard Wagamese to Sherman Alexie, we can see how Indigenous storytelling can take very different forms while still addressing similar realities. Both authors draw from their personal experiences. Wagamese reflects on intergenerational residential school trauma through Indian Horse, while Sherman Alexie explores life on a reservation in The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. Both books deal with identity, isolation, and the struggle to belong in societies shaped by colonialism.
Their approaches are quite different, though. Wagamese writes in a reflective and almost spiritual way, encouraging readers to sit with the weight of what they are reading. Alexei uses humor and satire, even when discussing serious issues, using comedy to expose harsh realities in a more direct way. These differences show that indigenous resilience is not expressed in just one way. Both approaches matter because they reach different audiences and contribute to a broader understanding of indigenous experiences.
Indian Horse is significant not only as a novel, but as part of the larger conversation around truth and reconciliation in Canada. The impacts of colonialism shown in the book are not just historical. The trauma experienced in residential schools continues to affect individuals and communities today. Saul's story also connects to broader patterns of harm, such as the 60s scoop, ongoing inequities in education and social services, and the marginalization of Indigenous voices in areas like sports and media. At the same time, Saul and Wagamese's stories reflect something more universal. Their experiences show how people often respond to trauma through avoidance, silence, or coping mechanisms like addiction. But they also show that people are capable of resilience and healing. By telling these stories, Wagamese helps readers think more critically about history, responsibility, and reconciliation, while also recognizing deeper human themes of loss, survival, and recovery. Overall, Indian Horse brings together personal experience, cultural memory, and historical truth to tell a story that is both deeply specific and widely meaningful. Through Saul's journey, Richard Wagamese shows how systems like residential schools did not only affect one generation, but created long term cycles of trauma that continue to shape identity, family, and community today. At the same time, the novel does not end in trauma alone. It shows that survival is possible and that healing can begin through truth, reflection, and reconnection.
By connecting Saul's story so closely to his own life, Wagamese shows how storytelling itself can be a form of healing and resistance. His work demonstrates that remembering the past is not about being stuck in it, but about understanding it in order to move forward. In this way, Indian Horse becomes more than just the story of one boy. It becomes a reflection of many Indigenous experiences shaped by history, and a message about resilience in the face of ongoing injustice.